Number 4. The Master.
I didn't so much as see the Master, but more so that I experienced the Master.
I experienced Freddie Quayle's desire of meaning in his life, and the lack of which drove an already fucked up, debaucherous person into a life of impulsive, drunken, depraved insanity. I experienced his need to belong to something greater than himself, and the eccentricity of Lancaster Dodd's almost otherworldly following drew him in and helped him fill that void. I experienced Dodd's confident and mysteriously enticing persona, sporting the look of a stalwart but welcoming man of enlightenment. I experienced the rise of the movement, growing ever larger and more influential over the lost souls yearning for wisdom. I experienced the bond that Quayle and Dodd had formed with each other, a strong, nearly adamant friendship. Some would call it a brotherhood, and others would say it was even deeper than that. I experienced Quayle's neuroticism overwhelming him, so much to the point where it threatens to derail Dodd's movement. I experienced the oddities the following had integrated into their lifestyles, but treated it with a form of unusual mildness that I couldn't help but respect in truth. I experienced wonderful direction and brilliant writing. I experienced a terrifically deadpan story with an odd sense of humor and perspective. I experienced some of the absolute best acting in cinema for quite some time. I experienced a mellow world caked in the bizarre and lathered with a greater life calling.
I experienced the Master, and I believe that you should experience it too.
Number 3. ParaNorman. Look, I've already talked about how much I love this movie to death in the most surprisingly good movies list. And you know what? I don't feel like repeating myself. If you want to know my full opinion on ParaNorman, just watch that video, skip over to number 2, and there you'll go. That may be unprofessional, but all that needs to be said here is on that video. Alright, shameless plug over, for now at least. One thing I will say is that I hope the Academy recognizes ParaNorman for its brilliance and best animated feature. Come on guys, really surprise us this time instead of just giving it to Pixar. Number 2. Silver Linings Playbook. Let me get something straight here. There are chick flicks, and then there are romantic comedies. Silver Linings Playbook is a romantic comedy, and it's one of the best I've ever seen. It not only manages to tell a humorous, endearing, emotionally charged story about people with mental issues, but the film is essentially uniquely erotic on its own, with its constantly shifting camera work, the razor-sharp and lightning-fast dialogue at times, moments where it's calm and content at 1 minute, but frantic and out of control the next. And the fact that writer-director David O. Russell has had a reputation for being batshit insane. Like all things that are delightfully insane, such as yours truly, Silver Linings Playbook is funny, quirky, awkward, and unpredictable. The writing is absolutely brilliant with some of the most engaging and often humorous conversations I've listened to in a movie for quite some time. The chemistry between the two leads is something to behold. You're totally sold on their interactions with each other. To call it genuine is selling it short. It feels real. But aside from being hilarious, the film also has its share of gentle, tender, emotional moments that really tug on your heartstrings and almost has you driven to tears at times. Especially with one particular scene with Robert De Niro and Bradley Cooper that is just so powerful and affecting that if it doesn't move you in any way, then odds are you have no soul. The film also doesn't pull any punches when it comes to the frenetic moments. It pulls you into this unstable world and just gets you as nervous as the characters. It's almost quite literally an emotional roller coaster because it transitions from one mood to another, up and down, left and right, looping across, betwixt and between. It can actually take a lot out of you if you're not careful. I'm not sure what you guys think about Bradley Cooper, but I like him, and this role is right up his alley. I love his charisma, and it fits into his character seamlessly. And it's nice to see Robert De Niro actually give a shit this time around. It's a wonderful reminder of his golden years back when he was a god amongst the acting community who gave cinema some of its most iconic roles. Chris Tucker actually doesn't make me want to pull my hair out this time around. He's actually a lot more mellow this time around, and ironically, it makes him legitimately funny in this film. Who would have thought that? But who is my favorite actor in the movie? There's no fucking contest. It's Jennifer Lawrence. I was simply floored by what she brought to the screen, and she had me drawn to her the moment she first appeared. Not only is she incredibly beautiful, she's one of the most talented actresses I've ever seen. And she's quickly becoming one of my favorites. House at the End of the Street notwithstanding. With it being a romantic comedy, I assume you can guess how it ends. But this is one of those films where you become so invested in these characters and the shit they go through, and endings such as the one I'm talking about is the right one to close the movie out. I initially had a problem with it at first, but the more I thought about it, the more fitting I thought it seemed. That being said, I implore you to see Silver Linings Playbook. It's a film that's as alive as the characters in the story and the people who made it. It's a low-scale, rocky, but ultimately wonderful display of cinema. And like I've said before, it's one of the best romantic comedies I've ever seen. Now before we get to my favorite movie of 2012, you guys know the drill. Honorable mentions, bitches! Ted. Ted is pretty much Family Guy, the movie, and in my opinion, that's not a bad thing. I was concerned about how this movie was going to be at first because Seth MacFarlane is already overworked as it is, but I thought Ted turned out to be rather funny. It's got your MacFarlaneisms alright. Pop culture references, cutaways, random access humor, campy, tender moments, and taking shots at being as offensive as possible. Some of the jokes do come up a little flat, but I'd say the majority of them had me at least chuckling. Mark Wahlberg is either hit or miss with me, but he does a solid job here, and so does Mila Kunis, who I swear some of the guys around me in the theater were saying, wait, this chick plays Meg? And of course, MacFarlane shines as the titular fuzzy slacker who carries the majority of the comedy on him simply because he's a pot-smoking, foul-mouthed teddy bear. A lot of my viewers seem to hate Seth MacFarlane, but honestly, I don't care about that. In the end, I thought Ted was another hilarious work from him.
I mean, I wouldn't have the poster on my wall if I thought otherwise.
Bernie. I've said before that every actor or director has at least one bad movie in them, but it can also be put in the reverse order. Every bad actor or director can have his diamond in a pile of shit. Bernie is Jack Black's diamond. I don't hate him. I think he's a good performer, but not a good actor. There is a difference, people. But without a doubt, this is Jack Black's best performance. He's able to fit his strengths as a performer into the persona of a person who really did exist and behaves that way. Not only is Jack Black good in this film, but also Matthew McConaughey, another star who is typecasted and made fun of, does a great job here as well, doing the same method that Black uses, which is utilizing his strengths. I also like how simple but true the story is. No matter how kind or sweet or saint-like someone can be, everyone has their breaking point. It points out that there's fallibility in even the best of us, the obvious consequences that follow and trying to cope with it. The fact that this was all true and even had a documentary-style interviews with the actual townsfolk who knew Bernie Tita was also really effective to the story and added a nice touch to the delivery. It's been out on DVD and Blu-ray for a while now, so if you want, give this film a go. Looper. Holy shit. Joseph Gordon-Levitt has had quite the year, hasn't he? He's been on all three of my lists this year, but I'd have to say that Looper was his best movie as a headliner. The film proves that you don't need $100 million to make a great sci-fi action movie, and it also demonstrates that audiences are willing to pay to see an original idea. It's a solid overall picture. It has a great story with an interesting concept that informs you of its universe without holding your hand and treating you like an idiot. Fine performances from the main cast, especially the kid who plays the child version of the Rainmaker. I admit he was kinda awesome and I hope he gets more work. And great action and wonderful cinematography even on the tight budget it reportedly had. Hell, even Paul Dano couldn't bring this movie down that much. Looper made a decent profit at the box office and that makes me pretty happy. Writer-director Rian Johnson is now 3 for 3 in my book, and because of the recent success that he's had, I hope he'll be able to make more films with a slightly higher budget and maintain creative range he's been giving us so far. I'm definitely looking forward to what he has in store for us in the future. Wreck-It Ralph. I guess I should say something about this one, now should I? Wreck-It Ralph was certainly a blast of nostalgia, and it was fun to see all the video game characters and themes being put together by people who embrace the style and mentality of classic games instead of just setting itself apart, doing its own thing with just a familiar exterior. But if I had to be honest, I thought it could have been better. Some jokes fell short, I thought some of the characters were a tad annoying, and I really felt that Ralph should have spent more time jumping in between games. This is kind of selfish, but I also wanted to see some characters in the movie, but didn't. Like, I really wanted Mario to be in the movie, but I was disappointed that he wasn't. But upon further review, I found that the director couldn't really find a good place to fit him anywhere. So I can't really blame him for that, although he is planned for the sequel. Other than those relatively minor complaints, Wreck-It Ralph is still a very competent and creative animated movie from the people who pretty much dominate the business. The plot was nice and relatable. It had a twist that I honestly didn't see coming. It's very much heartfelt, and you can tell that the people who made the film had a lot of fun making it. Overall, I'm glad I saw it, and from what I've read, a lot of you guys were happy seeing it as well. Moonrise Kingdom. If there's one thing that Wes Anderson has going for him, it's that he's unique with his delivery. All of his movies are contained within a mellow, deadpan universe where it's cool, calm, controlled, but still somehow manages to feel free-flowing and quirky. Moonrise Kingdom follows the same motif as all of them, and I'd have to say that it's the finest utilization of Anderson's style as of yet. It's funny, the camera work is as mesmerizing as always when it comes to his films, and it's apparent that the actors were having a good time during production. I enjoyed the often done but still effective story of young love, delivered in a way that only Wes Anderson could, not having their chemistry and interaction be contrived and done in the cliched cinematic love story style that we all know and some of us hate, but in the way where it feels more natural, where it has its awkward moments, but these are awkward kids. You can't just help but cheering for them even though they're really being more mischievous than they should. So if you're looking for a romantic comedy with a different aesthetic and delivery, I'd say Moonrise Kingdom is a good bet for you. Killer Joe.
Wait, 2 Matthew McConaughey movies on a best of list? What the hell is going on here?
This movie is fucked up. Wanna know how fucked up it is? 3 words. Chicken wing fellatio. Killer Joe is a wild ride in terms of plot and characters. A half-baked plan of matricide that was doomed from the start, a method of collateral essentially involving a minor being a sex slave, and a triple-cross sexual affair. Killer Joe is not a movie where you cheer for anyone or wish anyone for success. You witness depravity at its absolute lowest. And just when you think it's hit rock bottom, the film surprises you again with something that raises your eyebrow even higher. It's definitely not for the children, and it's not for the faint of heart or the easily offended. It was rated NC-17, and you'll clearly see why, especially with it showing Bush within the first 5 minutes. Matthew McConaughey has had a lot of shit thrown at him over the years for just being the pretty boy with no ability who quickly cashes in on chick flicks. But in actuality, that's not really the case. It seems that McConaughey has had some sort of hidden potential as an actor and can bring it out with flying colors if he actually decides to do so. This is undoubtedly the best movie I've seen him in, and you know what? Depending on what he's got going on in the future, I might be in genuine danger of actually looking forward to what he's doing next. Someone help me. Argo. And lastly, the movie that's most likely going to win Best Picture at the Oscars this year barely makes it onto the honorable mentions list. What kind of sense does that make? Well, in all honesty, while I thought Argo was really good, there were some problems I had with it. I certainly liked and appreciated the true story, the attention to detail, and the way it tried to dedicate itself to being as congruent to realism in relation to the actual Iranian hostage crisis. But the movie itself, in my opinion, actually doesn't really do much to cement itself as a cinematic story that sticks in my head. There are some parts that will almost certainly stick around in the annals of cinematic history, like the line, "Argo, fuck yourself." But I actually remember about 30 to 40% of what went on in the film. Everything else was just filler that I forgot about in a few days. And the acting, while it was good and it got the job done, doesn't really attempt to take flight and make an impression. And I think movies like Argo are usually the ones that rely on acting as its main selling point. Don't get me wrong, John Goodman and Alan Arkin are fantastic here, but they're not really around long enough. Ben Affleck is okay at best. It's becoming obvious now that he's a better director than an actor. I'd say that Argo was an overall good movie, with its moments of being great. But honestly, I don't think it should win Best Picture. I still think it's at least worth a watch, so I'll just let you be the judge for yourself.
And here it is, people, the moment of truth. Number 1 was a movie that I was pumped to see ever since it was announced. And not only did it live up to the hype, in my opinion, it exceeded them. and it comes from one of my favorite directors of all time.
My number one favorite movie of 2012 is Django Unchained. Holy fucking shit, this movie was just awesome. I love a good western, and when I see one, it stands out over a ton of other films that I've seen. Django Unchained may call itself a southern, but that kind of detail shouldn't matter at the slightest. It's a brutal, hilarious, uncompromising tribute to spaghetti westerns with a dash of blaxploitation, and I loved every single fucking minute of it. This movie has balls of steel, and that's no surprise seeing that it's coming from Quentin Tarantino, who's no stranger to controversy. Even though it's grounded in pulp and not really fixated on realism, it pulls no punches when addressing the subject matter, the ugliness of slavery. There are moments in Django Unchained that will make you cringe, but not necessarily in the negative way, but in the effective way where you're absorbed into the story where something bad happens, you feel it yourself. And you can't bear to see what happens to the person being affected by it because more often than not, what happens to that person is extremely brutal and bloody. That's efficient filmmaking right there. Which is why it's all the more satisfying when Tarantino imbues Django with fulfilling the fantasy of any slave or sympathizer by letting him exact his revenge on the people who wronged him and his people, by blowing away every motherfucker who did him wrong. The characters in Tarantino movies are almost always unique, and Django Unchained is no exception. There's actually a surprisingly amount of development to them. You witness Django transformed into a full-fledged badass. You see Schultz become not just a bounty hunter, but a man of righteous conviction. And you'll see Candy unveil his mask and devolve from a southern gentleman to the true madman he is. The way I see it, these are probably the best characters Tarantino has ever written. Speaking of writing, it's as sharp as ever here. The funniest moments are from the dialogue and the various conversations. I will say this has got to break some sort of record where people drop the N-bomb the most times in a movie written by a white guy. Some people may have a problem with that, but I thought it was funny to see how far Tarantino could take it. Besides, the black people in the theater that I went to didn't seem to mind as much, so neither should you. Django Unchained was an absolute blast to experience. It's entertaining, the conversations are wonderful to listen to, the characters will make you either love them or hate them in the best way possible. Every time someone gets shot, more than likely you'll feel it as well. If you complain that the movie is too over the top and unrealistic, whatever, you can have that sort of snobbish mentality. But not everything in cinema should be down to earth and realistic. In fact, in all honesty, it should embrace the opposite. We go to the theater to watch movies to escape from that kind of shit, to be transported to worlds that abide by the rules of the creator. Anything is possible, and they have the freedom to make it whatever they damn well please. Quentin Tarantino has always abided by this philosophy, and Django Unchained affirms his status as the champion of the cinematic underworld. It's the most satisfying and entertaining film I've seen in theaters in recent memory, and that's why it's my number one favorite movie of 2012.
And with that, my annual year-end review of the movies in the past year is complete. I don't know what else to say. I'm honestly pretty burnt out. These videos took quite the toll on me in getting them together for you in such a relatively short amount of time, so I think I'm going to take a little break to get my shit together. So all I have to say is that 2013 has a tough act to follow, and it's still too early to tell whether or not it has the potential to usurp this year in quality. So, I'm just going to be rational about it, and make my judgments one film at a time. I'm PMRants, and I hope you enjoyed cinema in 2012 as much as I did. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to sleep.
Hey, if you like comedy sketches, feel free to check out my film channel, Catharsis Pictures. You'll be glad you did.
I see it! Let's stop!
Speaking of which, Aaron, my roommate and collaborator, has his own channel out now. If you want something more raw and insightful than my stupid ass rants, feel free to check him out as well. As always, thank you for watching.